Good afternoon. God, what a quiet crowd. Good afternoon. There we go. That's a little better. That's a little better. I'm Richard Potter. I'm Director of Corporate Engagement for Kansas State University. And I want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us, whether you're here in the Alumni Center or watching online, either at Salina or Olathe or somewhere in one of our extension offices, or maybe just in your office taking part on the video. So I want to welcome you to session 2 of the Working with Industry Boot Camp, Making the Connection Part 2. I'm invited to the dance, but I don't have a dance partner. So just to give you a quick overview of who you're going to hear from today, we've got a special guest from the Department of Communications and Marketing, Ashley Martin, who's the Director of Marketing, and Michael Oetken, who's Creative Director. And then following their remarks, in addition to myself, we'll hear from Mitzi Richards at the K-State Foundation, and Ken Williams and Rebecca Robinson from the K-State Institute for Commercialization. As we have in the past, if people are online and are interested in asking questions, we've got microphones here for the people that are present, but if you're online and have a question, you can send it to me at my email address, rmpotter@kstate.edu. And if you're interested in joining the conversation, I encourage you to join us on Twitter at K-State Corporate, and also hashtag KSU Industry BC for Industry Boot Camp. So without further ado, let me invite Ashley and Michael to the podium, and I'll get their slides set up, and we're off.
Well, how's everybody doing this afternoon? Good. All right. Well, we have a number of things that we want to share with you all. Thank you. This afternoon, and a lot of it comes back to what you probably read in the program about how to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And a lot of that comes from perception and how people view you in the marketplace. And that's what the Division of Communications and Marketing is really going to help you with today, and share a little bit about some of the expertise that we can let you guys tap into as well. So with that, I want to start by explaining a little bit about what a brand is. There's a lot of misconceptions out there that a brand is just the look and feel of materials or the look and feel of something that you would present to someone in industry. And it's so much more than that. It's really an enduring platform about who you are. And it comes down to perception and that essence of what you are and what you represent. So for K-State, anybody want to throw out a word that they think of when they think of the K-State brand? Let's make this interactive, guys. Family, rushing. I should have known that was coming, right? Yeah, family. So these are ideas that are really prevalent when you think of a brand and how important it is that you really capture that essence of who you are. There's a number of things that impact how you present your brand. There's your positioning strategy, so it's how you position yourself among your competitors. Your communication strategy overall, which is how you message yourself and some of the words that you use that really enable you to get across that essence. And then also it's a promise that you make to your constituents. So it's important to keep these things in mind as you consider how you present yourself in industry, and then also how you represent K-State in industry. So a brand that's pretty well known is Google. When you think of the Google brand, you think of innovative. You think of cutting edge and somebody who's really there to help you tap into resources and tap into information. And I know Google's the first place that I think of. There's probably some Bing users out here, but you definitely know that that's a place where you can go to find a lot of information. And they've really positioned themselves as a leader in the industry and kind of a cool and, again, cutting edge are the words that come to mind. So this is just another example of a brand to think outside of the K-State brand for just a second. When we look at what we can do in communications and marketing, there's a pretty standard process that we go through whenever we start a communications plan. And what that allows you to do is tap into the K-State brand in all of your efforts as well. So I'm going to walk through this a little bit and just share with you the process that we work through as we help you guys out. First, it starts with an audit, and that's looking at all of the communications that you put out there in the market. Are they consistent? Are they sharing the same type of message? Do they look the same? There's a number of different pieces involved in that. And then we also do a competitive scan. How are others presenting themselves in the market? Is there overlap? Are we not positioning ourselves differently than our competitors? So when we go through that process, we're looking at several different things. We're looking at the verbal strategy, which is kind of the messaging and the content that you put forth. The visual, which Michael will get into here in a little bit as well. The virtual strategy, which is online, digital, anything along those lines. The venue, which can either be a physical place, so it's the experience, or it can also be where you're sharing your messaging, the different communications avenues. And then video, which I want to give a shout out right now to our video guys back in the corner who are making it possible for those online to see us today. So from there, we move into really defining your audience and defining those goals and objectives. And it's so critical that we do this at this point, otherwise your messaging down the line, it's not going to reflect back on your goals and what you're trying to achieve. And there's a number of ways that we do this. With our strategic planning efforts, we do a lot of research. And again, this goes back to competitive research, but also kind of getting, again, at that brand essence of who you are and what you're trying to achieve. And then we build a marketing plan and a timeline from there for execution, and then probably the different types of communications that you'll be pushing out moving forward once the plan is established. And it's also critical at this point to establish some benchmarking. If you can't measure your success in the implementation of your plan, then why are you doing it? So it's so important to make sure that you know where you've started, where you want to go, and how to measure that success along the way. From there, we're able to develop the tactical portion of, and this is the thing that probably gets people most excited, when you get to see the physical pieces and see how you're marketing yourself in the public. And it's easy to want to start at this step because it's kind of that instant gratification of being able to show progress that, hey, I've got something. But that back work is so crucial to make sure that what you're creating is going to be successful. And then the best part about marketing, it never ends. It's on a loop. You always have to go back and evaluate and make sure that everything is still on target, because goals change, objectives change, and you want to make sure that that message is consistent, even though you're going to be changing some of those things along the way. So how can we help you do this? This is not the technical structure of the Division of Communications and Marketing, but I want you guys to understand that the Marketing Services Unit is here to connect you to all the services that we have at DCM. So we have News and Communication Services, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a moment, Design Services, which Michael will talk about, Video Production and Engineering, so they not only capture events and record events and stream events, but also produce some pretty awesome videos. Hopefully you guys have seen a lot of those out on the K-State YouTube channel. We have photography services covering a lot of the events on campus, and then also creating materials for promotional pieces that we do. And then web services, getting the university aligned in the content management system and making sure that their websites are accurately communicating their messages as well. So again, the point of this graphic is just to show that marketing services, all we do in addition to creating those strategies for you is connect you to these services so that you can execute your plans. And the way that we do that, the way we're structured, is with our client services area within the marketing unit. So all these folks on the screen, myself included, we are all assigned to different departments, colleges, units across campus. And we're your first point of contact whenever you need something, whether it's a template for a way of communicating yourself out to industry or something specific for your department that you're trying to get done. Contact us. We will help connect you with those services and get you what you need to do to make sure that you can share your message. And there is a website up there that shows where that page is located, where you can find the list of all the client managers and who they serve. And if you don't see anybody or see your unit on there for some reason, just feel free to email me and I can help with that. The News and Communication Services Unit, this is probably an important one to you guys, especially if you have research that you want to get out there among industry. They really handle media placements, media relations efforts, and then also getting those stories out on K-State's social media channels. So this is a great resource, and everybody reads K-State Today, right? I'm seeing some nodding. I'm seeing, okay, good. This is a really great way to get your information out to campus. But then something that not a lot of people know is those stories do also go to a select list of local media as well. So, you know, you hear some things about K-State Today and the fact that there's a lot going on and it's kind of hard to pick and choose what you want to read. But know that those stories are getting out there, not only to campus, but also to media. And then additionally, if there's anything specific or specific trade publications or things like that, we can help with those pitches as well. So there's a lot of different avenues that we can help you with. And from there, I'll let Michael take over.
Okay, you have to bear with me too. I've been fighting a cold for the past couple days, so hopefully my voice will make it through here. I kind of wanted to go over a little more of what Ashley kind of talked a little bit about, is more the visual brand. As creative director, I work closely with the K-State brand, ensuring that it's consistently carried out through all the different publications, the web pages, our videos. So I work with not only the graphic design areas, but also with a web and video as well. So I pulled some stuff from our brand guide. If you go to the K-State site and just do a search for brand guide, you'll find a PDF, and it has very detailed information about how to use specific marks, logos, things like that. So basically, before the Division of Communications and Marketing existed, the brand was kind of all over the place. Every department, every unit, every college was kind of doing their own thing. There really wasn't a consistent look for the university, which was confusing for external audiences. You know, when they see something from one college looks totally different from another college, you know, it didn't click as, you know, being from the same university. So that was kind of the big first step when the division was formed, was to have a consistent brand, come up with a word mark, a logo, and then consistently execute that throughout the different mediums. So the university has kind of four major marks: the word mark, the seal, the K-State word mark, which we use a lot with like admissions, and then the spirit mark, which is mainly used for athletics, and then the power cat. We do use the power cat on specific publications if it fits the need, because it is a very recognizable mark. You know, we don't use that only for athletics. And this slide here is kind of interesting because sometimes we'll get things where people try to create their own logos. Definitely don't want to do that. We're here to help. We can provide you with the consistent artwork and files to, you know, have the proper word mark. We have I believe, is there a form online? If you go to the brand guide, there's emails in there where you can contact us and then we'll get in touch with you and get the right word mark and logos and files to you to use. For each college, we do specific word marks for colleges, departments, units. You know, we drill all the way down to whatever the need is. So we have a certain system set up so that we cover all the different entities throughout the university. Some of the brand resources, these are found on the Division of Communications and Marketing website. We provide PowerPoint templates. These are just kind of some generic ones. We can definitely help if you need something more customized. We can work with you on creating that. Like Ashley said, just go through the client managers and we'll get a job started and get that done for you. because sometimes, the generic one doesn't fit all your needs. So as far as the creative services, we're here to help with any kind of needs that you would have as far as publications, template designs. We can create templates for brochures, newsletters, things like that. We can help, if you want somebody to help all the way to the final step of getting it printed, we're here to do that as well. We can consult if there's any kind of design questions, or if you need help with different things, we can consult on that. I put in here personal brand sheet because I know with working with industry, sometimes you need to just have a quick sheet that you can hand out to industry that kind of has some main points. We'd definitely be willing to help with that. We can create a nice professional looking sheet that you'd be able to use for things like that. And photography as well. We have some great photographers that can get in and get classroom shots, lab shots, specific things that you need. Just go through the marketing services and they'll get that set up, and we'll get those guys into your classrooms. So lastly, I just wanted to show some just quick examples of this type of stuff that we do. We do everything from advertising, like the one on the right there was an ad that ran in the Chronicle of Higher Ed. It was when we were doing our Wildcat Way campaign. We do stuff for colleges, College of Business. We did some ads for their professional MBA program. We do stuff for departments. This was on the left, a Grain Sciences brochure. On the right was annual report we did for department in engineering, arts and sciences. Annual report for BRI. We also work with the different campuses. The one on the right's a flyer that we did for K-State Olathe. And you can kind of see that each one kind of has its own style, but yet through the consistent use of the word mark and, and the treatment of the color and stuff like that, there's that consistency throughout everything. So we definitely want each department to have their own feel, but yet fall into to the overall brand of the university. So with that, I think we're going to open it up for any kind of questions that you have for Ashley and myself. And if we have any online questions too. Yep.
Are your services billed out to different departments, or how do you handle all of those costs associated with it?
Yeah. The question was, are services billed out, or how do we handle costs? Design services, video production services, pretty much everything at Division of Communications Marketing is free to university entities. There are a few caveats to that. Obviously, if pieces are printed, the printing costs are charged back from university printing and things like that. But as far as designing, creating content, anything along those lines, this is a service that we provide to the university.
How do you interact with K-State Research and Extension Communications? Because I know there's some overlap there.
The question was about how the Division of Communications and Marketing interacts with K-State Research and Extension. The beauty of it is we actually co-locate now. In the past, KSRE was located in McCain for the most part. There are a few exceptions. But about last summer, was it? We were able to bring the majority of their team over to Dole Hall, between Dole and then also KSUIC. And so it's been really nice because we've been able to collaborate a lot on how we share news. We use some of the same news distribution services now, where in the past it was kind of two separate distribution methods. We're able to collaborate a lot more just being in the same space. So we interact a lot with them on a daily basis.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You'll bear with me while I swap out PowerPoints. I'm going to invite Mitzi Richards to join me on stage here.
I don't know how anybody else because that's where the
That's-
microphone and the camera is. And it's a little uncomfortable for me to stand
So which side do you want to be on?
there. The left, I'm always on the
All
left.
right, all right, that works. Mitzi and I are going to talk a little bit about the corporate engagement process, and we'll review a little bit from the first session of making the connection, and then we'll expand some on preparing for industry interactions and making those connections with potential industry partners. And then we'll wrap it up with talking about some resources that are available to assist you in the process of developing relationships with industry partners. So, Mitzi?
For those of you who were not here the last time, I'm Mitzi Richards. I serve as Senior Director for Corporate and Foundation Relations at the KSU Foundation. I've had a couple of people ask me after the last couple of sessions why I care about what happens with corporate relations on our campus, and more importantly, why I feel it is so important for faculty to understand more and better and different ways of engaging with industry partners. And I want to make it really clear that it is so critical to the future of philanthropic investment in the university that we have this rigorous and robust industry engagement with our faculty. Many of my colleagues across the country will be the first to say that without those kinds of relationships, university philanthropy really, with corporate investment, dies. And it's a slow and painful death. So that's why it matters to me very, very much, because I see every day in the relationships that I've had the honor and privilege of managing over the last, since 2006, that it is really critical that the university industry partners, the foundation for those partnerships are really those faculty relationships. So I'm going to start there, and now I'm going to go over this corporate engagement process workflow that you see up on the slides. This workflow was put together by the Network of Academic Corporate Relations Officers. Those are people like Richard and I who represent research universities, and we get together a couple of times a year. Just got together at UC Davis last week with this group, and our primary product is white papers that we write about the process of engagement, as well as an annual conference where we have 2 days of engagement, 1 day focused on industry content, so we hear from our industry partners, and a second day where we talk about universities and how universities are changing the way they engage industry. So this engagement process, as you can read, is really one that starts with, at the beginning, oftentimes building relationships around the strengths of your university. So again, back to my comments about the importance of faculty and the faculty expertise that's provided across the academy. I brought a show and tell. I brought my Ingram's report that I get every month. It's a Kansas City rag. It's a rag that we are actually in this month, which was really exciting to open it up and see Dr. Tim DeNoble, and a quote from April Mason, our provost. So these are the kinds of things that I look at every day, pulling out names of trends, industry leaders, those kinds of things, and that really begins to feed this workflow. So very quickly, this rag itself, like websites and lots of other information that I look at routinely, tells me what's happening in industry, where there might be a connection or an interest at K-State. It's a people-to-people kind of thing, but it does provide leads. And then once the lead from an industry, when we have a connection and we have an interest, oftentimes that flows through this general identification of mutual needs and engagement opportunities is kind of that first step. Then it flows to develop and structure collaborations and partnerships. It's a lot of buzzwords, but basically that means we align a goal. We find something that we are both interested in making in creating a partnership around, moving something forward together. And then close deals. That's really where we have a mutual investment, where there's skin in the game from the industry partner that could come in many different the investment could come in many different shapes and sizes. Usually the philanthropic investment is not something that not the initial investment. But it's always an important part of that early conversation, because we want to always set the stage or build a platform that we will be talking about lots of different ways the company can invest in the university. And I always want to get that plug in for putting philanthropy at the table early to manage the expectations of the relationship. And then stewarding and growing the relationship. So it could start with one faculty member or one college or one unit, but our goal obviously is to expand it. Any questions about that corporate engagement process? Is it pretty intuitive? Make sense? The next slide is the partnership continuum, and this one again is the Hewlett-Packard slide that many people steal. I saw that UIDP, our guest last time, they use it. Certainly NACRO, the Network of Academic Corporate Relations Officers, use it, but it's a really nice way of articulating the different steps or stages in a relationship: awareness, involvement, support, sponsorship, and strategic partnerships. Obviously, we want our continuum to go up. We want to grow the number of strategic partners that Kansas State University can say they're involved in. The thing I guess I wanted to talk about with this slide is that this is really the long view. This takes a while to get from awareness to involvement. There's some relationships that don't move past involvement, and that's okay. Doesn't make it an unvalued relationship, but obviously our goal is to make sure that we move then to support. So you can see underneath each one of these levels of engagement, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, that there are many different opportunities. And really, faculty engagement really starts at the very beginning and is certainly very much involved when there is a strategic partnership.
So I want to review a little bit from our first session, where we had the faculty panel discussion. And you might recall that the faculty talked about looking for opportunities to build awareness, that first step in the continuum in this previous slide, that first step in building awareness of K-State and who you are as a faculty member, and who the faculty or who your potential industry contacts might be. The faculty that were here on the panel last time talked about going to professional association meetings, actually joining professional associations, and then also going to trade shows. I believe Dick Hesse mentioned the Conference for Researchers of Animal Diseases, and then I wanted to put up a couple more examples of what you might look toward. I know, for instance, that there's at least one engineering faculty member who's a member of the the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. So there is an association for everything. And so as you're looking at your areas of interest, to look at what are the professional associations that you might look toward to begin building some of those industry relationships. But you don't always have to join an association. There are also trade shows that might be of interest, and a couple of them I wanted to make note of. One is coming up in April in Kansas City. The Pet Food Forum is a global gathering of industry that is engaged in the pet food industry from every aspect of the supply chain, So it's not just animal science, it's not just vet med, it's not just grain science, it's also engineering. It could be sales, it could be chemistry, any number, sensory analysis, any number of different types of opportunities at the Pet Food Forum. And so that's coming up April 27th through the 30th in Kansas City. And if that does pique your interest, I do have a limited number of discounted opportunities to attend that. There is a registration fee, but being in Kansas City, it would not be expensive from the standpoint of travel. So if that's something that you'd like to know more about, please reach out to me. And then I wanted to also mention the IFT annual conference. I believe that stands for Internet Institute for Food Technicians. Is that right? Yeah, something like that. But Food Technologists. Thank you, Larry. Yeah, so it's a big deal in Chicago every year, and I know K-State always has a big presence there at the trade show and also involved in a lot of the workshops. So that's a place to go and interact with potential industry collaborators. But you don't want to get the cart before the horse. You want to be prepared before you go. So one of the first things we'd encourage you to do is to meet with your Associate Dean of Research, find out what's the protocol for engaging with industry in your college, and meet with your department head and find out more about how your department has been engaged with industry in the past, or perhaps is looking to engage with industry in the future. You might also ask your department head, well, who are some faculty members in our department that I might reach out to learn more about this? Who are some faculty members outside of our department in our college and even beyond our college? And that's one of the reasons why we've set up these networking sessions following the workshops that we've scheduled here, so that you can interact with other faculty members that you may not have met before and may not have other opportunities to interact. But begin to build that internal network to find out who's doing what related to industry in your department, in your college, and elsewhere in the university. Then, of course, what Ashley and Michael were talking about here from communications and marketing. Meet with them and work with them to develop your personal marketing materials, and they can help you prepare something that looks very professional and to leave behind with industry contacts, or to forward to them after you've engaged with them a little bit more. If you have a lab, and you think that your lab, you'd like to invite industry to access your lab, then you'll want to be sure to meet with the Division of Financial Services and develop an approved schedule of charges. And I should mention, too, if you're trying to scramble to write down these URLs, these PowerPoint slides will be available on the toolbox page of my website. And you'll be able to directly link to all of the links that we've got in these slides from that. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mitzi.
I think there was some really great offerings from the faculty panel last time that talked about looking for opportunity. Was Dr. Hesse, I think, who talked about the best place to discuss things are in the hallway talk, the barroom talk, and the informal dinners. I just want to echo that. I think it's really critical that when you are in a space, whether it's a conference or a trade show where you're meeting with other potential industry partners, look for that person who may share your same passion. There's many scientists and technicians in industry, and so look for somebody who possibly could share your space and have conversations with them. How to start up a conversation is really pretty basic, I think. I think we all know that, it's introducing ourselves. It's asking good questions like, tell me about your company. What are you working on? And listen for alignment. That's probably the nut here, that oftentimes when we are in front of others, I'm no different than anybody else. My husband once told me, Mitz, people really don't want to know that much about what you do. You know, take the tape recorder out and just say, I work at K-State. That's enough. But it really is important, I think, when you are asking those good questions, to listen for that alignment, listen to where you hear something that you think, I'm providing a solution. I'm working on something that would be of interest to this company. Always follow that 80-20 rule. Let them talk 80% of the time, and I'm serious. You know, I have to say prayers sometimes not to talk, so if that works for you, you can do that. But I'm really serious, that you really have to think about not what you're going to say next, but what leading question you're going to take from that conversation. Think again back to what you're working on and how it might provide or solve a solution. I often think that it's good to share a business card, but save that great marketing material that our marketing experts can provide for you to follow up. So when you get back to campus, you can shoot them a note. I remember meeting you. I really appreciate what you said about your company's interest in a mutual space, and here's my expertise. That gives you that opportunity to not hand it to them at the conference, but to follow up. Still on, how to make the connection, the industry scientist is interested in your research. Oftentimes I find it's important to ask permission to share your relevant scholarship, talk to them about when you get back to campus and you shoot them your one-page overview, keep things simple and concise, but follow up very quickly. I have a really strong sense that momentum is really important. Be the first thing they get when they get back to the office. Get up really early and send your email really early in the morning so it's the first one they get. And they will respond and want to know more. Richard.
Yeah, and then what do you do? So they want to respond, they want to know more. What's your next step? And I think I would encourage you to remember that this is a numbers game. You might interact with any number of potential industry partners and follow up with, you might follow up with a dozen and maybe only hear back from one, but that's normal. And it is part of the process. This is in working with industry. It's not unlike submitting a dozen federal grants and maybe one will come through. So it's the same principle. It's just a little bit different process. So you're building these relationships. You've come back from a conference and sent out your follow-up, and somebody has said, hey, this sounds interesting, so let's talk some more. And then what do you do next? And so I think what we want to encourage you to do, the very next thing, is to socialize this potential opportunity within your department and your college. You might want to meet again with your department head, with your associate dean for research, tell them here's what the conversation was like, and how does this fit in? How do you think this might fit in with the goals and objectives and the priorities of our department, of our college, of K-State University? Now, if it does fit in with those priorities, great, then it's kind of like full steam ahead and you can begin pulling a team together. If it does not fit within those priorities, that doesn't necessarily mean to drop it. That doesn't necessarily mean you should stop that relationship. For one thing, relationships that can take a while to develop, and what doesn't fit the priorities now might fit the priorities 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road. But the other thing is that to remember, if it doesn't fit the priorities now, and you do choose to continue to pursue that relationship, just be aware that the resources that you have access to support you, to assist you, are going to be more limited than if it does align with the priorities of your college and your department. Again, that's not to say you shouldn't pursue that relationship if it's of personal interest to you and if it feels like a good fit to you. But when you're seeking resources to assist with you, those are going to be aligned toward where the department and the college and the university priorities are. So just be aware of the landscape so that you make an informed decision about how to move forward in that relationship. And so we keep moving along the line. Now the stars are aligned, and you're ready to start dancing with this industry partner. What's next? Well, you'll want to do some due diligence. You want to find out where else might this company be engaged at Kansas State University. And the best, or I should say maybe the quickest way to do that is to contact me at my office. I'd be happy to help do some digging, find out where a particular corporation might be engaged, whether it's at the foundation or in career and employment services or in research or somewhere else. And we can begin to work together in that respect. I'll also make note in your binder there is a contact sheet at the back of the binder of folks in the other departments that you can interact with as well. And I want to note that these particular links that I'm putting up now, particularly the research and sponsored programs and the career employment services link, those will put you in contact with the representatives that are specific to your department or your college, if there are specific. Sometimes it may be a generic person, like, sorry, Mitzi, you're not generic, but Mitzi's the one person at the foundation that deals with corporate relations. In career and employment services, I believe they have someone for agriculture, someone for engineering, and then in research and sponsored programs, they've got folks that are designated to specific colleges and in some cases specific departments as well. So these links can be a good resource for you also as you move along in the process. So Mitzi and I want to kind of go back and forth on this a little bit and talk to you about the holistic approach, going back to the continuum of the relationship and the holistic approach. Whether it's sponsored research or fee-for-service or a philanthropic gift, sometimes it'll be a combination of two or more of those aspects, and career and employment services and other aspects of the university. So I think the important thing is to keep the relationship moving forward. It's not no one of these is any more important than any of the others, but the important thing is to engage and keep the relationship moving forward.
I think that's a really good point, Richard. I think oftentimes we think there's a straight line to the finish line, and it's really doesn't really work that way. Oftentimes I have had working relationships with a really strong partner at a company, and we've been working together for a couple of years, identifying ways that company could work at K-State, and then I get this email on a Monday morning, I've got a new job at another company. And it's congratulations. Oh, I don't know. I'm happy for that person, but I know it's really changed my relationship. So what I've learned over years is you really want to widen that relationship immediately. I mean, you meet somebody at a conference, you find out that you have a great, you've got a good thing going, you connect, get to know other people at that company pretty quickly. Because oftentimes things never really do straight line. They're kind of messy, and you don't want to lose. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You want to make sure that you have a relationship that's at least across that space that you're working on. But I couldn't agree. Well, besides that I'm what was the term?
Oh, generic.
Besides the fact that I'm not generic, I want to explain that I have a big team at the foundation. I work very closely with the directors of development in all of the different units. I work on a monthly basis. I sit down with them and we go over the corporate relationships that we are working on. And just this morning, I sat down with the development director in the College of Engineering to talk about our Boeing relationship. Now, Brett Larson, who's an exceptional development officer, he's been traveling to Seattle and LA and DC and visiting with alumni from Kansas State University, who he obviously wants to foster a philanthropic relationship with, who are also high-placed executives at Boeing. So he brings back that great Boeing information, and we talk about how can that really further advance our relationship with industry. So when Boeing's executive lead, Steve Wade, comes to campus this April, we will include some of those conversations in that visit. So again, it's getting broader and wider and making sure that you have a very in-depth far and wide kinds of relationships in the company. But like Richard said, I think when you're first getting started, it's really about making sure that you have started the relationship based on that unique sharing of your own passion for what you do together, what that person does in their work and what you do in your work.
So in terms, when it comes down to sponsored projects or fees for service or a gift, it can be a little bit confusing in terms of how to figure out which is which and which one you might be working with. So we've got a couple of resources in your binder. I can see some of you are already looking at that already. There is under Session 2 in your binder a document called Sponsored Project, Fee for Service, Gift, which one is it, and where do the funds belong? There is a lot of good detailed information in this, and may be a little bit challenging to weed through because it can be complicated. And so what I did was provided a handout that you should have gotten today as you came in the door. Anyone that did not get a copy of this handout? Debbie Worth, if one of you could bring Debbie a copy of the handout. Anybody else need a copy? And for those of you who are watching online, this was mailed out. It was attached to the reminder email that we sent out yesterday. And it's also been uploaded to the Toolbox site under Working with Industry Session 2. So it's available there. But what I wanted to do was kind of take the information, the text in this document, and create a kind of a schematic of what does this look like? How do I tell the difference between what's fee-for-service or what's corporate-sponsored research or what might be a philanthropic gift? I'm not going to go over this in detail with you, and I will say this is really oversimplified to try and help you gain an understanding of how to identify those different types of support. I want to also note that, I guess I can do this on the next screen here. These, the red octagons are really, they're interconnected buckets. They are, a corporate relationship might encompass any one of those or two or more of those. Even in the same project, it could happen. Sponsored projects, here's where it gets even more complicated, is that a sponsored project can actually include fees for services if the sponsored project also requires basic or applied research, or the execution of a contract is required. And so you can see that it does get complicated. What I wanted to do was kind of provide a simple flow chart so you could get a better understanding of it yourself. But again, we're here to help you out with that. There are resources here at K-State to help you out with that when you get to that point. One other thing I want to mention with regard to the red octagons and stop signs, if you will. These are, when you come to a stop sign in traffic, you don't stop permanently. It's a signal to stop and look both ways before you proceed. All right, so that's what these stop signs mean. And in fact, when Ken Williams comes up after we're done here, he's going to start at that sponsored research stop sign and show you how the flow then works through technology transfer and commercialization. So again, this is a resource hopefully to help you try and understand it, and we'll continue to try and provide more of those resources as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Mitzi to bring us home.
The next two slides are pretty self-explanatory, but just top 10 tips on working with industry partners. Back to that 80-20 rule, listen and ask. Probably my number one. Number two, under-promise and over-deliver. It's whether it's saying I'll get back to you when I get back to campus, or it's touching base when the relationship has been ongoing. It's really important to make sure you always deliver what you promise. I guess it's that integrity thing. Number three, an idea, and I think a tip for if you are a young faculty member and you are looking at gaining some relationships on your campus, there's capstone courses that are often sponsored by corporations. Getting to involved in those in the classroom, leading and assisting with those is a way to get to know corporate leaders right on your campus. Understand campus resources and how to partner. I think Richard just did a very good job of giving you a lot of information, of knowing where to go when you're looking to partner, knowing how to socialize across your department, your unit, your college, about what you're looking to do and what you need, and people are there to help you. Leverage your success when you publish. Make sure, or when you have something to be proud of, kudos, share those. Share those with your Rolodex, share those with the people you know in industry. Email your publications out to your network. Oftentimes, those will really get a lot of, that'll be a really good thing to do on an ongoing basis to get industry to recognize your expertise. 6, read industry, peers, journal articles, patent disclosure information. I think there's a lot of information out there that's written by industry partners that if we tag into and we read and we're aware of, we can understand where there are connections on our campus. Visit face-to-face. When you're out traveling, if you're going to a meeting, kind of plan around that, the kinds of things where you can reconnect with people face-to-face at corporate locations. We can always help you with that. Invite corporate contacts to campus. If they're traveling this way, ask them to stop by campus. I think there is no greater way to make an impression on our campus than ask somebody to come here. I don't know exactly why people are so thrilled when they come to K-State. I have a theory that maybe they have low expectations. That's my theory. But when they come, they leave so impressed with the people, impressed with the welcome, impressed with our students and our faculty and our administrators. So, we have a lot to be proud of. And so bringing those folks to our campus to get in front of classrooms, to be here and get to know us is important. Recommend campus engagement. If you get to know somebody, talk about the ways that they can be involved. There's advisory councils, there's student mentoring opportunities, coming to the career fair. One of the things I think is really important if you meet an industry representative where they do not recruit at K-State, really promote recruiting at K-State, because without that connection, sometimes a relationship never really gets past those early stages. And the last thing is just that simple thing, stay in touch. With electronic ways to communicate now, there's really no excuse not to, but keeping those relationships fresh and your Rolodex thick with those contacts, you will be astounded. The first year you might think, well, gosh, I just have 30 industry contacts. But if you do 30 industry contacts in 5 years, it really begins to multiply, and it's very important. Okay, with that, I think we are...
Q&A.
Q&A, yeah. Questions, ideas, thoughts.
And I'm watching my phone to see if any emails are coming in.
Richard, I'll jump on the Renee. You had a slide up there where you talked about scheduled charges.
Faculty that I've talked to find that extremely frustrating because they don't know who to go to. And when they go to certain entities, it takes months, if not years, to get through the schedule of charges. So how do we help facilitate, when cycle time for industry is so important, how do we help facilitate the schedule of charges and make it easier for faculty?
That's a good question, one which I'm going to have to get back to the group on, because it is an issue that has come up. Paul, do you want to field that question? Paul Lowe from the pre-award services, and yeah, great. He's at the microphone.
They alluded to it in the slides. You do not need a schedule of charges to do service if it's a sponsored project. Now, the schedule of charges is that stopgap measure if it's not a sponsored project, so we haven't gone through the cost analysis process to set up a certified charge for that service, then the schedule of charges is the way to engage with external collaboration that's outside of the arena of sponsored projects. Now, so I'm saying, you know, if we have a time-sensitive issue, let's just go through an internal budget process. Let's put together a fixed price, fully burdened rate and go for it. And so we can speed that process up here. And if you'll attend the March 10th boot camp, we're going to go into that a little more detail and get down into the weeds about that. So the schedule of charges is just, that's another way to capture. We cannot compete. There's laws actually that govern our ability to compete with the private sector. We have tax issues involved, so we have to go through that costing process to make sure we're not competing with the private sector. And to make sure the Board of Regents does require that we pursue full cost recovery on at least a break even. We can't assume a profit, so you know, we have to go through that analysis. So, okay.
Joel, I will also mention, and I apologize to the people who are online. I didn't repeat the question. This is all about speeding up the process to develop a schedule of charges for your lab or your facilities. In the document that I referenced, the sponsored project, fee for service, et cetera, there is a contact information in there, Julie Huff, Assistant Controller. And so I would say that's one person that you should contact if you're asking about or you're wanting to develop a schedule of charges. And also, I think there's an awareness out there within the circle that I'm working with that there is confusion on that, and so they will be working to try and smooth that out and make those transitions easier. Other questions? And I'll check my phone to see if email questions are coming in. Hearing none, I'm going to turn the podium over to Ken Williams. Ken Williams is Director of Licensing for the Kansas State Institute for Commercialization. I'll get it set up for you. Thank you.
Yeah, just need to move up to the top slide. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. As Richard said, I'm Ken Williams. I'm the Director of Licensing with the Institute for Commercialization here at K-State. We are the organization that's charged with trying to commercialize the technology developed at the institution. We do that under a contract with the Kansas State University Research Foundation. So before I get into the discussion here today, one quick question. How many faculty researchers do we have in the audience today, just here? All right, great. I'm glad to see that's a pretty good number, and I hope there are several online that are watching too, because really I'm hoping to speak to you guys today. As we engage in the tech transfer process, that's often viewed as kind of a one-way path, which I discussed in the last session. But really there's kind of some two-way benefit that can be gained by engaging in that process, and I want to make sure that you're aware of that benefit and also make sure that you know exactly what we're trying to extract as we go out and engage with industry. So when we, 2 months ago or so, when we started developing this series, we titled this session, How Making the Connection Relates to Technology Transfer. I think after starting to put the slides together for the presentation, I really think that the title should have been How Technology Transfer Relates to Making the Connection. So on April 9th, we're going to have a long session. You guys are going to get to hear from me for an hour. I apologize in advance, about the intricacies of tech transfer and contractual relationships and how we're bound by those contracts and how we go through the process and those kind of things. So that will be the nitty-gritty detail of how we do our job and how that relates to you guys. But really what I want to talk about today is just touch on about 10 or 15 minutes here of additional benefit that we can provide to you guys as we engage. So technology transfer, I think traditionally, as I said before, people see it as a one-way street. You're taking something that's developed at the institution and you are pushing that out into industry, either via a license with an existing corporate partner or trying to establish a startup or other joint venture. When I look at tech transfer, and after being in this industry for well over a decade now, I start to see that there's additional benefit that we can provide to researchers. The truth is, a majority of the things that get disclosed are not going to get licensed. They're not going to go into a startup. Although we do have a pretty good success rate here at K-State, and I'll get into some of those numbers on the 9th, the fact is that a lot of it is not going to turn into a license. It's just the way it is. However, there are a lot of different things here, and I'll touch on these specifically, that come from the process that I think can help researchers better define what the industry is interested in, make contacts with industry folks they don't currently have contacts with, and really start to better navigate and develop their technology in an industry-relevant fashion. So we'll go through that and then also talk about some ancillary relationship examples. So I want to kind of give some props to our staff members that engage on the licensing side and some different deals that they've helped generate that are outside of the general licensing activity. And then we'll go through and just discuss, okay, if you haven't disclosed an invention to the Research Foundation or you don't intend to disclose anything right away, can you still access the folks at the Research Foundation and then our staff? Yes, you can, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So if you look at the standard commercialization process, especially here at K-State, and this is a little bit of the minutia that I was talking about that will be on the 9th, but just to better understand the whole process, as Richard said, I'm kind of picking up at that sponsored research stoplight. So if a researcher has developed a relationship with a corporate sponsor, or they have received funding from a government funding entity or somebody else, they've determined that there is a good relationship there and they want to work together. That relationship is converted into a contract. At Paul Lowe's shop, Pre-Award Services, Paul and his staff work to make sure that the relationship has identified expectations and everybody knows exactly what they expect from the relationship. So you go through, you do your sponsor research agreement, it turns into a research project, the research gets completed, and it turns into something. There's something tangible, intellectual property, whether it be patentable or know-how or other types of IP that you feel has come out of that work. That is then disclosed to the Research Foundation. Teresa Landis and her folks will receive those disclosures. They maintain the intellectual property on behalf of the institution. And really, it's up to Teresa and her group to make the patenting decisions relative to that intellectual property and try to secure that IP. Once the decision's been made to secure that IP, that's really where our staff gets involved, and we start marketing the technology. We're doing outreach to industry, trying to find folks that may be interested in the technology. If we do find somebody that's interested, we then convert that into conversations, technical conversations, so we will need to interact with our faculty. We do not pretend to be the technical experts on any of the things that we work on. It's just too broad of a range of technologies here at K-State for the four of us that do this to be experts. So we engage with our faculty, let them work with our technical contacts at industry, to really determine if there is interest in the technology. If there is, then our group works to value that relationship, value that technology, convert that into a term sheet and then a license, and then hopefully it's a done deal. Turn it back over to the Research Foundation. They manage the contractual relationship going forward, so revenue coming back from the license and then patenting and those kind of things. So, as I said before, this is traditionally viewed as a one-way street. The honest part of it is that you're really engaging in a push marketing strategy. So I often joke around that tech transfer is an industry where you're taking a technology that nobody knew existed 2 weeks ago. You're trying to go out and engage with the company and convince them that they want this technology that they didn't even know existed, and then you want to charge them money for it. So it's not necessarily an easy path of engagement. And so, it really relies on having the right people, the right place, the right time for everything to come together and really align. And as I said before, I think the entire process at K-State is set up in a way that we do that fairly effectively, but there are things that just aren't going to get licensed. Yes?
I have a question.
Sure.
Your graphic up there, and I work a lot with you and your staff. When you send me a CDA,
Yep.
where that hits is in Era 5, correct?
And
About to involve in the discussions with
Yeah,
those
and it
companies.
depends, Debbie. I think again, this is set up as a very simple, linear type relationship. I think as Richard and Mitzi pointed out earlier, I think all these things are entangled back and forth. So this is kind of to show a simplified, based on this component of the relationship, here are the folks you need to be talking with kind of approach. But you're right. So once a technology is disclosed to the Research Foundation, it becomes their property, essentially. So pre-award services and your staff really focus on the front end. So when the discussion is relative to the research, when that turns into something that is commercial, patentable, then it becomes property of the Research Foundation. So when we engage with you on CDAs, confidential disclosure agreements, also known as NDAs and other names, what's usually happening there is that we found a company that is interested in the technology. They want to have a conversation about that technology, but usually they want to have a two-way conversation. So they want to discuss the technology itself, but they also may want to disclose to our faculty members some of the work that they're doing, confidential information. So then we usually have to have a three-way CDA. And I know I'm getting in the weeds here a little bit, and again, we'll talk more about this on the 9th. But in that situation, we need to have the confidential information relative to the technology, which KSERF then owns, covered. And then we also need to have our faculty members covered because they are K-State employees and they're receiving that information, which KSERF really doesn't have any control over how they then use that information. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, and one of the other things that I'm trying to understand as well is because you're trying to push this technology, and you did indicate just a little bit ago that it's not the easiest thing to do, is sometimes that could be why things could be very time sensitive.
Yeah.
Because some of these individuals
Absolutely.
may or may not want this information right away, correct?
Right, that's correct. So you are pushing it out. You're dealing with then a potential lag on their end to actually have interest in the technology. But then we also have metrics we're trying to hit based on timing of patenting events and the potential to return technologies to the inventors. So there are a lot of different components we're trying to hit on the timing side too, relative to how we protect the intellectual property. And if we don't have certain partners identified in a timely manner, then it has implications on what patenting protection we can actually pursue or that KSERF can pursue. So again, we'll get into those details a little bit more on the 9th. But I think the point here is, or really what I was wanting to emphasize is, the question can become on the researcher side of things, is it worth the effort? So right now, over the last 3 years at K-State, for every 100 disclosures, we've issued 31 licenses or options. So you look at that number, that's fairly good relative to the industry and relative to our peers, but that's still nearly 70% of the things that may not have anything related to it. So over the last 3 years, for every 100 disclosures, there are 31 licenses or options that have been, it's not bad. It's not a bad number. That actually ranks us about 36th nationally when you look at all of our peers from the autumn survey. So K-State does a good job of converting what they do have into actual licenses and options in the marketplace. So not bad. But again, the question is it worth it for our faculty members? So I want to show some other value points here that we're hoping to generate essentially as a service to our faculty members as we go through this process. So the first, really when you engage with the Research Foundation and they start making the patenting decisions, you start to identify the state of the art. What's really going on in the patent landscape, in the prior art landscape, relative to the innovation that you are developing as a researcher. So the ways that we engage in that process, KSERF may work with their patent attorneys to do a patentability analysis. So really you're asking the attorneys to take a look at the broader patent landscape and try to determine, is this innovation, the K-State innovation, novel or not? And so there's a difference between novelty and then having something where you have freedom to operate. And again, we'll talk about that in the future. But you're really trying to determine, is this new, is it novel, relative to what's out there in the patent landscape. We do, on our team side, to try to start identifying potential corporate partners, corporate leads. We actually go through a patent tree analysis. What that does is you are looking at who's patenting in the space. You find like technologies, so things that are kind of like this technology, and you try to determine, okay, who's investing in these technologies via patents. So you are finding out both who's referencing technologies like this and who's patenting new and innovative technologies relative to this and beyond this. And then finally, we also do a prior art search. So I think people get confused relative to prior art. It's not just patented material. It's anything that's in the public ether, anything that's out there. If you can do a Google search on it and you find it, that's prior art that could limit your patents. So we're going through those processes, and as we identify that information, we want to be able to provide it to our researchers so they can have a better understanding of where their work fits in the patent landscape, in the prior art landscape. So essentially what we're trying to do is determine what is going on and who is interested. That's really what we're trying to determine, and we want to make sure that you guys get that information as well. You go to the next step of accessing corporate leads. If we find something that we believe is novel and new, potentially marketable, we then will engage in marketing outreach for the technology. And what we do in that process is essentially we work with our faculty members to develop a one-page, non-confidential piece of marketing material. And then we try to identify companies that may be interested in the technology and present them with that information and try to start the dialogue about the technology and whether or not they're interested. So as we were engaging that in process, we did an analysis here a couple of months ago. We reach out to about 350 to 500 unique companies a year across all the various technologies developed at K-State to try to find those corporate partners. So for each technology that gets disclosed, we end up working with between 10 and 20 companies, or at least outreaching to 10 to 20 companies to see if they have interest. When I say outreach, we are really actively marketing the technologies that come out of K-State. Some institutions will have more of a passive approach. They'll place technologies on a website, hope somebody finds it, and if they do, then they'll engage. That's not the process here at K-State. If I did that, Teresa would fire us right away. But we're lucky. We don't have a ton of disclosures at K-State, but we, which some people could say could limit your capabilities. I don't think our numbers show that. But it also gives us an opportunity to essentially market heavily the technologies that do get disclosed. So as we do that, we're essentially establishing a list of live contacts. So we want to have a voice on the other end of the phone. that may be interested in the technology. So if they have a patent submission website portal, we may submit to that, but that's not good enough. We want to find a CTO, a director of R&D, somebody that's a live contact that we can have a technical and business discussion with to see if they have interest in the technology. So as we develop that list of contacts and those relationships, we of course want our faculty members to have access to that information. Finally, as we engage with these corporate partners, we submit the marketing materials to them, we start getting feedback from them. Not only are we looking to license the technology, but we're really out there developing a market survey. So it's amazing what some of these folks will disclose to you, even in non-confidential discussions. It's just an unbelievable amount of response and information that we get back from these companies. We distill that into a report that we submit to the Research Foundation both halfway through the process and then upon completion of the process. And really, that activity helps us determine the commercial relevance of the technology, the direction that the market's going, what are their specific needs. In some cases, we're way too early on the technology front. It's just, they're not ready to make that move yet. Other cases, we're 5 years too late. They've already gone a different direction, and if you look at just the basic information that's out there in publication, you may think you're right on the straight and narrow of exactly what industry wants, but when you really get into the discussion, you find out that they have taken a 90-degree turn somewhere in the last 2 years. You find out the reasons why, and again, we can convey that information to our researchers so they can better angle their research towards what industry is really interested in at this point in time. So finally, really our initial goal through this process, as I said before, is to license the technology or get it out there for public utilization. We want the public to be able to utilize these technologies based on the mission of the institution. And we also want to generate a return to the institution that can be used to further their mission. So to fund research, to fund different activities relative to the research mission of the institution. So as I said before, this doesn't always happen. We do a fairly good job, but some things just aren't going to find a home via a license or a startup. But there are non-licensed wins that I think come out of this whole process. We can help generate information that our faculty members can use to better understand what industry is interested in. And ideally, what we really want to do is be able to facilitate that interaction with technical leads at different companies. If we get to a point where they are interested in the technology, we set up the meetings to facilitate technical disclosure. You've got an email address, you have a phone number, you have a dialogue with those folks. And now that we don't necessarily own that relationship, that's a relationship that we want our faculty to be able to take advantage of moving forward, whether the company licenses the technology or not. So with that in mind, I just wanted to go through some real examples, held names from this as it relates to our faculty members and of course the companies, but just to give you an idea of some of the things that have come out of this work. After Tony from UIDP spoke, in the last session, went back to the office, and Arushi Gupta, who was one of our licensing associates, and now she's gone back to get her MBA, works for us part-time as a licensing assistant. She started laughing because Tony had mentioned that there are times when industry is already tracking the work of our faculty members. They're following their publications, they know what they're doing, but they just haven't had the opportunity to really engage with those folks yet. And in this case, one of our faculty members in chemistry, Arushi was helping to market a human health technology that they developed. And sure enough, as she outreached this small company who just happened to have gotten acquired by one of the largest pharma companies in the world, she found out that, yes, they've been tracking the faculty members' work for the last 3 or 4 years, hadn't had an opportunity to engage with the faculty member, and this was just the right place at the right time to allow for that engagement to happen. So they're now working together. Lindsay Biggs, who is one of our licensing associates, really focuses on the plant side of things. She was marketing a heat-tolerant plant technology that came out of Plant Path. She had marketed that technology to all the major players. They had expressed interest in the technology, but said, frankly, at this point in time, it's too early. It's still too risky for us to license it in. And so we'll continue to market that technology as it gets developed. But as she had worked with the researcher, she had explained that we're happy to try to help facilitate some of these relationships. If you have questions, let us know. And so the researcher got back to her and said, hey, I'd really like to submit a USDA grant relative to this technology. I need a corporate sponsor, somebody that can write a letter for me that says they're potentially interested in this work. She then contacted those same companies again that we just marketed the technology to. One of them stepped up right away and said, yes, I'd be happy to write a letter of support for this type of technology, make a statement that our company is interested in this work, they're interested in the work the researcher's doing, and we'd gladly sponsor or at least provide corporate input to this project. Brett Ford, who is our licensing associate that really works in the animal health space. For those of you who know Brett, he's done a tremendous job the last 5 or 6 years of really developing good relationships with the folks, licensing personnel in the animal health sector. This has led to lots of different opportunities that I think there's many times when they have a question about things going on at K-State, they just pick up the phone, call Brett, ask him what's going on, or hey, I need some help reaching out to a certain person and making those relationships. So I don't have the actual number, but it's somewhere in the range of about, I think, $500,000 a year for the last 3 or 4 years that Brett's been able to help generate in sponsored research just by helping some of these companies navigate through the process and making our researchers aware of the interest that they have, the companies have in the work they're doing here at K-State. And then finally, this last guy on the list, he probably should be fired soon. But I was involved in a license here a while back, several years ago now, where the company licensed intellectual property from K-State. It's pretty broad patent. It is in the animal science, animal feed area. The patent was, again, broad, so they had lots of market potential, but they still need to refine it further. And so they didn't have really the capabilities to do that internally at their company. So what they ended up doing was sponsoring a PhD candidate that then could work here at K-State with our researchers to refine the technology a bit more so it's market ready. And then finally, just to follow up again on Mitzi and Richard's comments, as we go through this process, it's not linear. We're all over the place, but if we can be a point of contact that then can help direct folks to pre-award services when necessary, to the Research Foundation, to the foundation if they're interested in giving, to Richard if they're interested in a broader range of work here at K-State, and then to KBED, which is more of the economic development activity that Rebecca will be talking about. That's what we try to do. We want to make sure that people are getting to the right place. So one final thing, you don't have to disclose to engage with our staff. We want to get to know the researchers. We want to get to know what capabilities you may have. So as we're out talking with industry on the things that we are marketing, if they shoot back and say, well, I'm not really interested in that, but man, if you knew somebody that could do the following, we might be interested, then that's really helpful for us, just to better know what folks are working on. And then I just say here that, if you do have questions about patentability, marketability, potential technical points of contact you're looking for, want to know more about how the processes work, patenting, licensing, all that kind of information, we're always happy to have pre-disclosure meetings with faculty along with KSERF and their staff. We'll come to your office, sit down, you can invite you out to our office just to talk about any broad questions that you may have. So with that, final point, my contact information is up there. It's also in the brochures, in the folders. Always happy to answer any questions that you might have, so feel free to reach out. So with that, any other questions? I know we're running tight on time. Questions? All right. Thank you. Oh, you got one?
What if I'm shy?
I don't think that's the case, right?
So
Ken, great presentation, and I'm in the middle of some of this process now, so I can share with anybody that's interested. It takes a lot of time and energy on the researcher's part, and so I guess the question back to KSURF is, what's in it for the researcher?
I think that's a good point. And you know, earlier when I was saying, is it worth it? I mean, for me, it's easy for me to say it's worth it because I'm a licensing professional. This is what I do to make a living. So of course I think it's worth it. As it relates to the researcher, there is financial benefit from licenses that are generated out of this process that go directly back to the researcher. And we'll get into a lot more of the specifics of how that's distributed on the 9th. But there is benefit back to the researcher, their departments, their labs. You know, there's quite a bit of potential return on things that do get licensed. That being said, I hope, and kind of what I was trying to indicate here is that we want to also be able to, I know it takes time, but we want to be able to kind of offset some of, you know, we're promoting that faculty members go out, identify companies to work with, identify, you know, put together marketing materials to market themselves, you know, go through this process on their own, when frankly, in a lot of cases, we're already doing that. We're already promoting those folks. We're promoting their work. We're developing some of those relationships and those points of contact. So we want to be able to, you know, basically provide a service. If you do disclose or you're interested in this process, we want to be able to help, you know, kind of kickstart some of that process, give you some of that information, so then you can help, you know, yourself basically then develop a better relationship with those organizations. So I hope that answers what your question was. So, all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. And our next speaker is Rebecca Robinson, who's going to talk about economic development and how that interacts with research. So, Rebecca?
Thanks, Richard. And if any of you need something to eat or drink, feel free to get up and grab something. I know we've got a lot of stuff over in the corner, so feel free as I get started to help yourselves. We don't want any brownies to go to waste. No snacks left behind. That's our new motto. Thank you. Again, like Richard said, I'm Rebecca Robinson. I'm the Director of Economic Development at the K-State Institute for Commercialization. But all of my time is actually contracted to a separate organization called Knowledge-Based Economic Development, which is what I'll spend the majority of my time talking about today. Knowledge-Based Economic Development, or KBED, is a university community partnership focused on attracting knowledge-based or technology-based companies to the area, typically to have a physical nexus to the university. So typically we're leveraging university assets to create partnerships that result in economic development. Through that, our stated mission is to create and actively support a thriving entrepreneurial environment for knowledge-based businesses. We're a for-profit company. We were created in 2007 by these partners. You can see a lot of the usual offenders here in the room. We've got the K-State Institute for Commercialization, the K-State Research Foundation, the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce, and we've got Trent here, you might raise your hand, representing the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce Economic Development Group, the K-State Foundation, and our most recent partner, the North Central Regional Planning Commission. Also, as affiliate partners, we have Kansas State University proper and the City of Manhattan. They are affiliate non-voting members because, per their statutes, they're not able to participate as a voting member in a for-profit LLC, but they are very much at the table as well. Through this organization, it really serves as one of the operational platforms for the relationship between the university and the community. The community has actually aligned their economic development strategy with the strengths and trajectory of the university. So many university communities or communities all over around the country in general typically are doing something called rob thy neighbor economic development. So you see a company that looks like it would be a good fit for your community, and so you throw a bunch of money at them so that they come. You help them out to give them a big boost for a period of time. When that money runs out, typically those types of companies are looking for the next dollar. They're looking for the next incentive. And so Manhattan is a community that doesn't have, we're not Lubbock, Texas, we don't have a bunch of deep pockets, and so that sort of a model doesn't work, and it's also not sustainable. And so for the community, this conversation came together actually around GE Aviation, and actually Mitzi Richards back in 2006, 7, 8-ish era, when GE Aviation was interested in, they came to the K-State Foundation and said, you are a top finalist for a community that we are looking at to put an intern operation. And the group was like, we're a finalist? We didn't submit an application. So, and so at that time, the foundation pulled together these partners, so the community players, the university players, to really think about, well, what do we do to win them now? And through that collaboration and cooperation landed GE Aviation here, who has a growing presence in an intern operation. Through that activity, the university and the community looked at each other and said, why don't we make this an effort? If we're a finalist for GE Aviation, surely there are others in the country and in the world that would make sense to be here to leverage K-State assets that we can attract here. And we can create more robust partnerships with the university. And so through that relationship, we have now evolved into being named by Princeton Review as the 5th best town gown relation in the country. That is down from number 2 where we've been in previous years. So that is an incredible achievement. And this model remains an innovative and unique one in the country. I attend university economic development conferences around the country, and folks are still astonished that we can sit around the table and not fight. Many town gown universities have adversarial relationships. They're either fighting over landowner issues, tax-based issues, and they're not collaborative, or one side or the other runs the show. But really, Manhattan is a unique place for this type of relationship. Kent will be glad that I put this slide in here. This is the philosophy that really drove the KBED concept. So this study by the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland looked at why some states have higher incomes than residents of other states, and why those differences have persisted for 75 years. So they analyzed the per capita income growth across 48 contiguous states from the 1930s to 2004, and what they found was that long-run factors like innovation and skilled labor force make the biggest difference in explaining why some states have grown more than others. So really that mix of innovation and highly educated residents promotes the fastest economic growth and income growth. This underpins the reason why the focus of this economic development group is what it is. So for companies, what does that mean? Why do they want to locate here? Well, the reality is that almost everything that a company does is because they think it will somehow increase their profits, advance their company, or grow their operations. And so for K-State and for Manhattan, those opportunities for sustainable long-term growth are things like access to talent and workforce. It's having the right people to hire, whether that's students as interns or graduates, faculty expertise that they can tap into on an ongoing basis, or consulting agreements, those types of things. or it's innovation and research. So what's that pipeline look like for new innovation that they can use to grow their company? And finally, it's things like facilities and infrastructure, especially things that are unique or specialized, things like the BRI, specialized equipment that a company wouldn't individually want to spend their resources on. Companies also want to be here for the quality of life. They like to raise a family here, they like the pace, they like the work-life balance, they like things like Konza and Tuttle Creek and McCain Auditorium, and all of the things that a university community can provide. Many times these kinds of companies are friends of K-State or alumni and have a strong affinity for purple. And then finally, some are interested in being in a cluster. So cluster development is this idea that companies that are maybe in a similar industry want to be close to each other because there is a clustering of assets like, you know, supply chain or resources, facilities, infrastructure, institutions that can support that development. So maybe it's not necessarily that they're all formally partnered together, but just like-minded and ability to work with others around them. So what does that mean for you all? When a company locates near the university, there's many benefits to be gained for the university. The first is one thing that Tony talked a lot about, and that was a face-to-face relationship with partners. So like he said, you know, it's one thing to send an email off and then wait to hear back, or to send a nasty email to someone because you don't really know them. But if they're located here, that makes for a really awkward run-in at the grocery store. So that personal interaction really creates the ability to run across town to have a meeting to advance a research agreement, or to work out what types of talent someone needs, to sit face to face and get to know a company, get to know a partner. That typically results in, oh, you're working on this, well, we're interested in that, how can we play? And the alternative is a 3-week delay and a flight across the country to sit down and have those kinds of conversations. Additionally, many times having a company here results in additional research support. So this is where we talk about how this activity relates to research agreements and research relationships. Being close and accessible and capable of solving industry problems makes you more competitive for company research, for corporate-sponsored research. One of the things I think that Tony talked about was, if you can solve a company's problem, that's what they're interested in. That's the goal of corporate-sponsored research. And so being in closer communication and being accessible and having those conversations regularly will increase your chances of having additional support. Alternatively, there's consulting opportunities. Sometimes it makes sense to go down that route for engagement with industry, and those types of opportunities exist. Another thing is employment for students. So many times you've got a faculty of graduate students or students that they want to have hired. And we had an MBA group do a study both in 2006 and in 2010 to ask graduating seniors if they had an opportunity in their field in Manhattan, would they be interested in staying here? And 64% of that group said that they would prefer to stay, and many of them said that they would actually take a pay decrease to be able to stay. So many of our students have a strong affinity for this place as well, and it's our goal to create opportunities in their field so that they have that opportunity. One of the things that Dr. Berg talked about in the orientation was the motivations between industry and university in terms of what they would like to get out of a collaboration. And when we add an economic development, we add an additional facet to that. We create the community piece. And so the goal of KBED is to create these win-win-win situations so that faculty are able to have things that they would like, things like support for research and labs and jobs for their students. For companies, it's that access to research, talent, and facilities. And for the community, they're interested in job creation and local investment. And so the win-win-win situation is that a situation where a company is fulfilling their mission, but at the same time advancing the goals and missions of the university and the community. So that could be something where a company locates near the university, they initiate some sponsored research, they hire interns and our graduates, they grow, they add jobs, they invest additional money in the community, and then hopefully write Mincy a check. If there's a mismatch there, where one of these buckets isn't being filled, that may be a clue that either the company isn't a good fit for the community or for potentially an industry-university partnership. So maybe it makes sense for them to be here, but maybe they shouldn't be working with the university. So here's just a list of some of the services that our group provides, and I say our group loosely. While my time is contracted to KBED, I work very much in a team. So I work with the chamber staff, the city staff, the IC staff, the foundation staff, corporate engagement staff, regional planning staff, city staff, I said them already. All of these staffs that dedicate their time to this initiative. Some of the things we can do are to coordinate corporate visits. So when either a faculty member brings a company to town or we bring a company to town, we like to match the level of executive on the university side, the community side, with what the company's bringing. So if the company is bringing a top-level executive, we want to have them meet with top-level executives at the university, and we can help coordinate that. So maybe they're bringing their CEO, and they want to meet President Schultz, or they want to meet the chamber president, or they want to meet the mayor, that we can help to make sure that there's a match there. We're happy to host dinners, we're happy to host meetings. If a company is coming to visit with, say, one faculty member or one lab, but is interested in maybe exploring the possibilities with others, we can help to coordinate a cross-campus visit. So maybe a faculty member or a company is interested in visiting the College of Vet Med, but they also have interest in some of the animal sciences faculty members. We can help to coordinate both internally and externally. We're happy to help on the community side. So if they are interested in the community, whether that means a tour of the community, if it means sitting down with the superintendent of schools to understand what the school systems look like, or the amenities available in the community, what housing looks like, how can I find a realtor? Any of those questions that are really don't need to be in the purview of an individual faculty member or department. We also help companies to identify sites or locations if they are interested in relocating or expanding. So if that means a lab, an office, and I'll talk a little bit about facilities in just a second. We can help with assistance with economic development incentives. So I said earlier that Manhattan doesn't just throw a bunch of money into companies, but there are potential economic development incentives available for companies. The city has an economic development fund, and they have a formal process that they can go through to apply for those funds if they're fit for that model. The state is also another potential opportunity for incentives, and we've got a lot of folks at the chamber and the city that help to walk through that process, and we can help to not only give you the forms and tell you good luck, but take you through that process. We can help facilitate access to workforce, so whether that means partnering up with folks like Career and Employment Services on campus, or it means going to an individual department head to find individual faculty members who have a PhD student in a specific area. We can find those matches. And then finally, and maybe most important for faculty and administrators, is really project management for that K-State relationship. So many times, a company might be interested in locating here, but they first want to make sure that the partnership is nailed down. They want to make sure that they have a robust enough relationship that it makes sense to have a physical nexus here. And so that means building a relationship, locking in all of these different components and mechanisms of a partnership. And so whether that means us helping to interface to make sure that the 2 or 3 different sponsored research agreements are being correctly flowed through pre-award services, or that we can, we can be the point of contact, with the foundation or with Korean Employment Services, we are happy to help really shepherd along all of those different components. I mentioned facilities briefly, and here I have just a couple of pictures of places that I want to highlight that are either owned or operated by the various KBED partners. The first on your top left is the K-State Manhattan Innovation Center, and this is a 30,000 square foot incubator space. We're half office and half lab. That's where the K-State Institute for Commercialization and the K-State Research Foundation are located. We are a business incubator. That facility is a business incubator. It's owned by the City of Manhattan on university-owned ground in a K-State Foundation-owned research park. So it is a true economic development partnership, and is a great place to house companies that are corporate partners for the university. The next one is the Kansas State University Office Park. This is the latest drawings of what's envisioned to be the first 2 buildings on the site of Kemble and Denison. The one on the right side of that photo has, I think, 10,000 square feet of space available. It's all office space. And then the left building has 60,000 square feet of space available. That's all office space available for companies who support the mission of Kansas State University. We've envisioned some of those facilities housing companies who have intern programs with the university that would be a good fit for multiple corporate partners. But is really focused on the office side. And then the final facility I have there is the Kansas Entrepreneurial Center. It is a 6,000 square foot office and lab space facility. It is owned by the City of Manhattan and managed by the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. And it serves as a business incubator for companies that don't necessarily have to have a connection to K-State. These are not the only facilities that are obviously available to companies who want to partner with the universities. These are just 3 that I want to highlight. When a company is interested in coming to town, we will scour the landscape for sites, space to find, to match make and find an appropriate place for a company. I have quickly here just a few scenarios for ways that companies can sort of come in to our shop and how we become involved with them. All of these situations have taken place, but there are obviously no company names here. So one is when a company is interested in locating near the university, but they don't have a relationship. So this might be something like a company wants to locate within the animal health corridor, but they don't have a relationship with K-State yet, but they want to be in that corridor and close to the university. So in those instances, we reach into the university, find who might be appropriate internal collaborators and bring them to the table and try to facilitate a relationship. The next one is when a faculty member already has a great relationship with the company, but it makes sense to be closer to that faculty member because of the nature of the collaboration. So this might be a research-based relationship where a company is working and they're maybe entering the next phase of their research, and it makes sense to have really boots on the ground type of collaboration where they see each other more often. Then we can work to help attract them and to help find the right fit for them here. I might note that it could be an instance where it doesn't necessarily have to be a small growing company in this situation, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a long-term forever situation. So maybe you have a big global R&D presence that wants to be working with K-State for maybe a number of years, and it makes sense to develop a presence. We can help to foster and facilitate some of that activity as well. Another alternative is when a company is interested in expanding their relationship with K-State. So they have already engaged with K-State, maybe they're hiring students or they're already doing research, but they're interested now in growing that relationship, either the disciplines that they're currently engaged with or the type of engagement. So maybe that means they've done research, but they want to hire more students, and so they want to open up an intern office or open up some sort of operation here where they can hire more K-State graduates. And the last one is more of the clustering development type activity, where a company's interested in being near the university but not necessarily have a formal relationship. So, and this seems a bit weird, but is a reality where a company wants to be in an area where you have lots of like-minded individuals, especially when you're talking about things like global food systems, where you have talent pools that could move back and forth between companies. They want to be in an area where there's synergies and where there's infrastructure. But they aren't necessarily interested at the moment in doing research or hiring or engaging with the university. I might also note that when we talk about all of these, when I say a company could be more than or different than a private company. We could be talking about national labs, we could be talking about not-for-profit organizations, associations, government agencies or entities. The list is really limitless in terms of the type of organization, but it just has to be a good K-State fit. This is one thing I might mention. It's a little bit off of this topic, but is probably what KBED is most known for, so I might connect the dots here. In January 2010, President Schultz hosted a KBED faculty event focused on introducing folks to economic development and how they might engage with the KBED group. That event was so positively received that President Schultz said, "This is great, let's do it every 6 weeks." So that evolved into a program where we began hosting interdisciplinary events focused on identifying large areas where we may have economic development opportunities, or we might identify prospects. 23 events later and 850 attendees later, we've had a number of great outcomes. Many of those really have been internally focused. They've been really focused on fostering relationships with faculty that probably have never met and wouldn't have otherwise interacted. We've had a number of leads, a number of companies that we've identified that we've recruited here because of that introduction. And a number of large grant proposals and partnerships have been created through that program. We're currently revisiting this program to look at how it can work for KBED and for K-State over the next 5 years. And so the last event we had was focused on pet food, and we actually had half of the participants were from industry, and that was a very different type of faculty event and arrangement, and has brought forth some really interesting next steps and action items. And so I think you'll probably see more of that kind of stuff from us in the future. So this is the last thing I want to show, KBED by the numbers. I think these are helpful to show people because most folks on campus don't really know what we do or who we are. And the reality is that this activity takes a long time and is relatively proprietary for companies. So we aren't out there saying, "Hey, I'm recruiting this company to town," because I can't. Because if that was leaked, it could put the whole deal in jeopardy. And so often we have to be very confidential about what's going on. And then the other reality is that when we're involved in deals, you're not necessarily seeing a press release come from KBED. You're probably seeing a press release from K-State saying we have a new sponsored research partner, or from the chamber saying we have a new company in town, or the city saying we've just invested in an economic development incentive package for this great company that's here. But the reality is we are very much in the background, and we're very much facilitating many of these kinds of activities.
Most folks don't know that we were heavily involved in the Department of Ag relocation, or the Civic Plus expansion and new building, or the Veterinary Biomedical Research Center in Pottawatomie County. The other reality is that if a company doesn't have a strong relationship with the university, it doesn't necessarily make sense for them to relocate here. So we have many, many deals that are in the pipeline that take sometimes years to come to fruition or die. And so this is a very long and tedious process, but through it we've seen great results. So you can see here over 230 jobs that we've helped facilitate the creation of, with average salaries of $52,000. That's an estimated economic impact of $23.8 million and capital investments over $10.9 million. That has resulted in 4 research agreements with 2 in process, and 9 of those companies that we've recruited hire K-State students or graduates. So that's all I have. I have my contact information here. I'll take any questions. Feel free to reach out to me or check out our website. It's definitely much more of an external marketing piece. So if you have a company that you're talking to that you are thinking about introducing or thinking about having this conversation with, but want to first point to them here, it's a good resource for companies to look at. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Based on the partnership and with the City of Manhattan, it's understandable that the focus would be on Manhattan. Are you also interacting with economic development groups outside, and like, for instance, Salina and in the Olathe region and elsewhere? And if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a good point, and actually one I had in my notes but missed. So thank you. We are, because the City of Manhattan and the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce are full partners in our organization, the primary focus is on, or the initial focus, I should say, is on Manhattan. However, that does not limit us from leveraging our other campuses. And we certainly have. Another thing I should point out is that the North Central Regional Planning Commission, our latest partner, covers a 29 county area in Kansas, and so we have a much broader audience than just Manhattan and Riley County, and so we definitely are interested and are willing to participate in other counties, and have actually worked extensively with K-State Salina on some attraction prospects currently. So, anything else? Yeah, Larry?
One of the significant things that's happening is NBAF, and that is probably something that's going to provide some opportunities for your group. And would you comment on that aspect and what you're doing with respect to that?
Certainly, and I would assure you that's in terms of the community interest. That's one that the community is very excited about, and has high hopes that it will yield large economic returns. We are currently in the process with the university of exploring those opportunities and really thinking about how we position the community, how we position K-State, and how we can help develop those partnerships that make sense for economic development partnerships to exist. The other thing I might note is that there's a number of entities going through a master planning process right now for the North Campus corridor. In those conversations are the MBAF folks and the folks who would work with them. And so one of the things that we're doing in terms of planning areas contiguous to campus is to make sure that we have thought about what the needs will be for corporate partners, for MBAF itself and Department of Homeland Security, to make sure that we are accurately and fully prepared for NBAF when it comes online. Thank you.
That concludes our program for today. I want to again thank everyone for joining us and remind you that materials will be online on the corporate engagement website, kstate.edu/corporate, and then there's a toolbox website on site. Also want to remind you of our next session, which is coming up March 10th. Session 3, how to formalize the relationship. We do have a special guest. Connie Armentrout is Director of Academic Technology Licensing with Monsanto Company. Connie is going to talk a little bit about the Monsanto K-State relationship, so it would be kind of a case study in how these relationships develop and what can come of them. And then we'll have an industry-university dialogue, including Connie from Monsanto, as well as Katie Small and Paul Lowe from our pre-award services, and Mary Lou Marino from the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, talking about budgets, contracts, and statements of work. You don't want to miss it. It is going to be exciting. No, there will be very good, I'm sorry, I shouldn't poke fun at it. It's important information and good information to have, good people to know when, as you're working through this process of developing industry relationships. For those of you here in Manhattan in the Alumni Center with us, there are refreshments remaining. We want to encourage you to network and get to know your peers who are here today. And with that, I will dismiss and look forward to seeing everybody again on March 10th. Thank you.